In this video, we're going to be taking a look at SteamOS running on this budget gaming PC that I recently put together on the channel. And in that video, we took a look at Windows 11 running on it. Really nice little setup for what we have here. And to build this, I used a mix of new and used parts. A lot of the stuff was gotten on eBay, new stuff was purchased over on Amazon. I'll leave a link to those parts in the description and a link to the original video. But to give you an idea of the specs we're working with here, for the CPU, I opted to use the Ryzen 5 5600X. We've got 6 cores, 12 threads. You could go with something different if you wanted to, because we're working with an AM4 board. B550 Mini ITX. You could also go Micro ATX with the case I opted to use. 16 gigs of DDR4 at 3200, a 1 terabyte M.2 SSD, 650 watt semi-modular power supply, low-cost mesh small form factor case. It supports Micro ATX or Mini ITX. For the GPU, I use the Radeon RX 7600 non-XT, so we've got 8 gigs of VRAM here. So when building this machine, I did have SteamOS in mind, and that's why I opted to use the parts that I did. I knew they would work really well with official SteamOS, and you could always install any other variant of Linux. You could go with Bazite if you wanted to. And of course, we did test out Windows 11 in my build video because I know a lot of people are going to go to something like this with Windows 11. But since we've got a smaller form factor unit, I mean, this would be great for the living room. And these parts do work very well with this setup. So I'll show you. We'll head down to our settings, head down to System. And if we move down here, we've got SteamOS Hollow 3.715, so official SteamOS. And I just installed it using the Steam Deck recovery image. Everything here works from Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Obviously, the GPU and the CPU are working. And speaking of that, you can see we've got that AMD Ryzen 5 5600X. It says that it's up to 5.8, but it's actually not. This maxes out at 4.6, and I did a little bit of overclocking just to 4.675 in the BIOS, just to make sure we could get that 4.6 clock on all 6 cores. So we've got 6 cores, 12 threads, 16 gigs of DDR4 running at 3200 because we've got a B550 board, relatively inexpensive. And of course, the GPU. We've got the AMD Radeon RX 7600 non-XT variant with 8 gigs of VRAM. If you've messed around with the Steam Deck, this is the same operating system. We've got access to basically everything that we do over there. We've got our overlay, moving down, frame limit. We can disable the frame limit, enable VRR as long as your monitor supports it. Allow tearing, half rate shading. There's a manual GPU clock here, and it goes up to 2250, but this should clock higher on that 7600. This does work, but I don't want to underclock the GPU, so I'm going to leave this off. Scaling mode. Only thing we really can't change over here is the TDP. We're just going to let that run from the BIOS, and it does a great job like it is. And if you're building a machine specifically for SteamOS, chances are you just want it for gaming. But keep in mind, I mean, we've got a full desktop operating system here. So if you move down to power, you can switch to desktop at any time and get all of your work done over there. But I do like the performance and the way it looks. I mean, it's just really easy to use with a controller. And there's one other thing that I installed here. You might notice that we've got a little bit of a different look going on up here when I'm scrolling through. And I just installed Dekey and CSS Loader. So we've got the colored toggles. I do like the gradient there and the tilted home. There's tons of other themes that you can install here, really make it your own. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into some testing with this system. We're going to start out here. Let's do Borderlands 4. See how it performs here in Linux. Okay, here's Borderlands 4, and it doesn't look like it's doing too well. We're actually at 1080p medium settings right now. So I do think in Linux, at least at the time of making this, we do need a little bit of frame gen. I've tested this on even higher end cards in Linux and haven't seen amazing performance yet. But with frame gen enabled, it does make it a really playable experience. Unfortunately, it doesn't take us up over 100 FPS on average, like I was kind of expecting with something like this at 1080. In Windows, we do see much better performance with Borderlands 4 right now at the time of making this video, but that might change down the road. Next game we have is Cyberpunk 2077, and with this I'm at 1440p Ultra, but I had to take FSR to balance to kind of get what we're seeing here. Now I will tell you that even with the Ultra preset, FSR is at quality. We get an average of around 67, but I wanted a little more out of it, and I do think it looks really good. And by the way, I'm using FSR 3 here. I also wanted to test at least one fighting game, so we've got Mortal Kombat 1 at 1440p. This is at medium settings because when I go into the settings here in Linux, because I guess it thinks I'm on a Steam Deck right now, I can only go to low or medium with the settings, but I'm sure this would run at up to ultra settings on this setup. Spider-Man 2 is one of those games that's a bit hit or miss on basically any system in Linux right now, and it's been that way since launch. I'll tell you, sometimes I boot it up on a system that I've installed official SteamOS on, it runs great. I could restart the system, start the game up, same exact settings, and it's running really bad. But luckily, as soon as I started this up, we were able to go to 1440p high, and instead of using FSR, I personally like to use the built-in IGTI scaling. And with these settings on this system, we're seeing over 80 FPS on average. Another PlayStation port coming over to PC, God of War Ragnarok at 1440p Ultra with FSR set to quality. I thought I might have to take FSR to balance with this, but it's doing a decent job. We're seeing mid-70s on average with this game. And the last one I wanted to test was Doom the Dark Ages. We're at 1080p Ultra with FSR set to quality, and originally I wanted to go into this testing it with these settings and going up to 1440p with a little bit of frame gen, but as soon as I go to 1440p with frame gen enabled, the game crashes on. So I'm not exactly sure if it's a GPU issue or just a Proton issue, but I did try a couple versions of Proton, still seeing the same kind of crashes with frame gen in 1440. Overall, not a bad little setup with SteamOS installed, and there's several different ways you could put something like this together. If it was up to me to do this again, I mentioned it in my original build video, I'd probably go with the 5700G. Now there's one issue going with the 5700G over the 5600X, and that's that the 5700G doesn't support PCIe 4.0, but the 5600X does. So we will limit this RX 7600 to PCIe 3, but in most games, you're not going to see a huge loss in performance. It's like 1 to 3%. But there are a few games where it really does take a heavy hit, like the Spider-Man games. So keep that in mind. But to tell you the truth, I'd rather sacrifice a few frames here and there for a little more CPU performance, or at least a few more cores. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Really appreciate you watching. If you're interested in checking out the full build video, link will be in the description. And with something like this, you could do a dual boot setup, so you could always run Windows 11 on it and SteamOS. Getting SteamOS super easy to install. You're just going to use the Steam Deck recovery image from Valve's website. Everything with this setup worked right out of the box. I'll also leave links down below to all the parts used in this build. If there's anything else you want to see running on this, just let me know in the comments below. But that's it for this one. Like always, thanks for watching.